Dawn slips under the door, and the room holds its breath. Rushes smell of smoke and crushed herbs. Candles quiver. The bed is a stage, and the linen is a treaty. A young bride sits very still while senior ladies move like careful shadows. They smooth the sheet as if it were a charter from a great council. Outside, a page waits with a covered basket. A bell speaks in the city, and then is silent. What happened in the dark will feed letters that race across borders before nightfall. A queen does not marry for herself. She marries to lock peace to a name and to chain rival claims. The body of the bride is taken as pledge for a future heir. If the first son looks secure, the realm breathes. If doubt grows, the pact shakes. Canon teaching says consent makes a knot, and the act of union seals it. Without that seal, enemies can whisper that the bond is thin. They can argue that gifts and lands must pass back to old hands. They can say that a child to come will not be of true blood. Words in a hall can summon steel on a field, so the court craves a sign that can be shown and stored. The sign most courts trust is a square of linen. It can be lifted before chosen eyes. It can be folded and locked in a coffer. It can be carried like proof when proof is only hope. That is why the right turns harsh. Doors close, yet the crowd does not truly leave. Women wait just beyond the threshold. Men weigh silence like coin. By noon, clerks will scratch notes for ambassadors. Riders will go out with tidy lines that hide the tremor behind them. The bride understands the cost. One stain may feed a dynasty. No stain may burn it. Bodies differ, and nature is not a clerk. Yet politics needs pages and seals. So the bed becomes a court, and the queen finds that her voice has no place there. The linen leaves the room. With it goes a share of her life. The candles hiss. The hall wakes. The kingdom waits for a simple sign that must carry a burden no simple sign can bear. Law builds the frame, and fear tightens each joint. In church teaching, a marriage rests on two stones, consent and completion. Words at the altar tie the knot, and the union in the bed seals it. If the seal is missing, the bond may be judged thin, and gifts may flow back to old coffers. Princes learn these rules as boys, along with the names of saints and the forms of banners. They know that a clean start for a bride protects a clean claim for a son. They also know that one whisper about an earlier embrace can grow into a battle line along a river. Canon jurists write of impediments and proofs. They list wrong kinship and secret vows and error in the person, and they place inability beside them like a quiet blade. Courts of church and crown weigh such matters with patient voices and hard eyes. Scribes open leather satchels and set out sand for ink. They write every answer in a hand that will last longer than the people speaking. When the case touches a throne, the file grows thick, and the room grows cold. A queen is not a private woman in that room. She is the future of coin levies, parley, and harvest. Because bodies do not give simple signs, the court asks for tokens it can store. Oaths from senior ladies. Notes from physicians who speak in the language of humors. Letters from confessors who vouch for order and goodwill. Bishops set seals in warm wax. Chamberlains keep the slips in chests with iron hasps. At dawn, a courier rides with a packet, and by dusk, a minister in another city knows whether he should tell his master to open wine or to sharpen suspicion. Thus, a tender bond becomes a chain of paper. The irony is sharp. The more holy the union is claimed to be, the more it is turned into process. Blessing gives way to schedule. Prayer gives way to inventory. What begins as mercy becomes audit. Officials check that the couple shared a room for a measured span. They note the names of witnesses standing in a nearby hall. They record that a linen was shown, or that the sworn word of matrons was accepted in its place. The aim is certainty. The result is theatre dressed as truth. Under this weight, the new queen moves like a figure on a chessboard. She can be praised with soft songs at supper, and then measured by cold lines before sunrise. If the signs please the council, peace holds for a season. If they do not please, it is as if frost has entered the palace in summer. Friends fall quiet. Letters grow curt. A plan for an heir becomes a plan for a hearing. Law promised order. It delivers order at a price. The price is that the most private act is turned into a public ledger, and the bride learns that in this world, even tenderness must pass through a clerked door. Ceremony feeds proof, because eyes remember better than seals. After mass and vows, the whole thins to a corridor of faces. Torches spit. Wine warms the throat. Musicians soften to a hum that steadies the steps of the new pair. The steward leads. The chamberlain follows with keys. The ladies of rank carry linen and small flasks of scented oil. The bedding is not play. It is a public promise wrapped in soft cloth. In some realms, shoes are unlaced by chosen hands to show consent. In others, the groom is laid first, and the bride is guided to his side, while a priest speaks a last prayer for peace in the bed and fruit in due season. Curtains close, yet the world presses near. Pages sit on the rushes outside. Old nobles trade quiet jests that sound like wagers. The door becomes a border where the city ends and dynastic business begins. Customs vary and share a core. In England, friends sometimes tossed stockings for luck. In parts of France, ribald verse marked the moment the room was left to hush. Along the Rhine, the chamberlain might touch the coverlet with a staff to claim the right for the prince. In Iberian courts, braziers burned hot and rosemary sharpened the air. Everywhere, trusted women stayed within earshot. They were guardians of dignity and also witnesses the law could name. They counted time. They soothed fright with warm wine and advice earned over decades. They would be the first to see the linen at dawn if linen was to be shown. If not, they would swear to a council that all was in order. Uncertainty still lived in those dark hours. Bodies need ease and time. A groom may be exhausted by travel and feast. A bride may be clenched by fear. Winter rooms chill muscles. Summer heat dulls desire. Even with help from oil and counsel, the seal of completion may fail to arrive when the court expects it, so the ceremony builds cushions for pride. If the night brings no mark, the morning can still bring sworn words by matrons of character. If shyness stalls the pair, they can be left together longer, while the hall listens to softer music and calls it patience. By sunrise, the procession returns in reverse. Doors open. Smoke drifts into the corridor. The chamberlain receives the cloth or the spoken assurance. Clerks receive the news in phrases that seem plain and are anything but plain. Riders wait in the yard. A sign travels outward along roads and rivers and into chancelleries where men read it as risk lowered or risk raised. This is the purpose of the bedding. It turns a tender beginning into a report the state can use. For the couple, it is an ordeal that teaches them the scale of their role. For the realm, it is a breath taken or held. The candles gutter. The bed cools. The theatre ends. And yet it never really ends. The linen turns from household cloth into a seal that walks. It can be lifted, folded, displayed, stored. It lets a court point to something more solid than whispers. At dawn, senior ladies carry it from the room, with faces set for ceremony. They shake out the fabric to show that there is nothing hidden, then refold it with grave care. The chamberlain receives it as if it were a treaty. A coffer opens. The cloth goes in beside rings and letters. A note in a clerk hand records the hour and the names of those who looked. From that moment, the marriage wears an emblem that can be taken from wood and shown again when politics requires a reminder. Yet bodies do not obey charters. Some brides bleed, some do not, some do so days later. Riding, sport, illness, childhood accidents, all can change the skin that men argue about in halls. Physicians of the age speak with confidence and are often wrong. Midwives know more and are rarely asked to write. The sheet sits between knowing and believing. Its meaning shifts with hope. When peace holds, the court reads the cloth as blessing. When factions rise, the same cloth grows pale in memory. Enemies claim the mark was slight. Friends reply that modesty veiled it from crude eyes. Thus, a square of flax becomes a field of debate. Tricks live in rumor, goose blood, a finger pricked with a pin, a hidden vial crushed under a knee. Some tales are theatre told by later ages that love scandal more than truth. Some may be true. Courts knew this and built guards against easy deceit. Witness lists, oaths on relics, seals in warm wax. Still the mind of a prince prefers a sign to a void, and ministers prefer a record to a shrug. The linen answers that need with mute authority. So the cloth gains a second life. It travels to councils when a dowry is disputed. It appears when an annulment is sought. It is named in letters to foreign courts where men who never saw the bride will judge her by a sentence about a stain. The private sorrow or relief of two people becomes a tool that moves money and borders. The lesson is sharp. A state will always try to bind chance to fabric. A sheet cannot make truth, yet it can carry enough belief to steady a throne for a season. Medicine in the courts moved on the map of humors. Learned men said women were colder and wetter, and men hotter and drier. From these four qualities they drew lines toward love, fear, and fertility. Galen and the old books were copied in Latin and carried to palaces. A compendium from Salerno taught of the female body in patient lists and cures. Surgeons added what the knife and the scar had taught them. Midwives knew most and wrote least. Their craft passed from hand to hand in small rooms that left few pages behind. When a match was at stake, physicians were summoned like arbiters of weather. They read pulses as if they were the tide. They warmed urine in glass and held the flask to a window to study color and cloud. They tasted a drop of sweat for signs of excess cold. They asked about the monthly course and whether it came regular or scant. They looked for signs of chill in the limbs and for knots of fear that tightened the belly. If the groom seemed weak, they whispered of overwork and riding and too much wine. If the bride seemed rigid, they advised heat and rest and time. Remedies were gentle and firm at once. Baths scented with rosemary and bay. Linen warmed by the brazier, spiced wine with cinnamon and ginger. Ointments made with musk and civet. Electuaries thick with honey. Pessaries of clean wool dipped in oil to ease pain. Soft food that feeds blood. Garlic to quicken heat. Sleep before the bedding and prayer upon waking. Some advised nights of the moon that promised increase, and they marked holy days that barred the bed. Confessors and doctors agreed on moderation and on hope. These councils shaped policy because ministers needed causes they could name. A report that the queen was cold in humor could explain delay without shame. A note that the king was drained by war could excuse an empty cradle. When children came, the theory felt sound. When they did not, the same theory turned harsh. The woman bore blame more often than the man. Clerks wrote that her nature was slow and her womb heavy. The court nodded because the words fit fears already grown. So a queen stood between rooms. In one room, women set hands with skill gathered over years. In another, men unfolded books and spoke of balance and heat. Between them lay a bed and a throne and a future that neither room could fully command. Before, vows a quiet rite unfolds behind thick doors. Senior ladies climb the stair with a coffer of linen and a small box for relics. Heat from a brazier dries the sea damp. The girl stands with hair unbound and hands folded. Modesty holds as far as fear allows. The visitors speak softly and work as if counting coin. They look for signs that custom imagines clear. They bring no metal tools. Eyes and fingers and long practice are their craft, and the room smells of rosemary and hot wax. They are not judges, yet their words can move a crown. If they find nothing to blame, they carry calm to a mother or an aunt. If they falter, the house trembles. A dowry waits on the balance, so does a frontier and a winter garrison. No one will write their names in a register, yet their oaths may ring longer than the wedding mass. They swear to speak only to the right ears. The queen to be learns that privacy already belongs to the realm, and that her breath is counted like tax. Princes try to buy certainty while distance still divides the parties. When a match is made by riders and letters, an envoy studies gait and temper, as if those could prove inward truth. He notes that the girl rides easily or keeps to a litter. He writes that her speech is mild or quick. He praises schooling and piety. He sends a lock of hair and a scarf that smells of civet. The packet reaches a council where men read scent and script as if they were law and not the guesswork of a long road. Where fear runs high, the church may ask for an oath from matrons at the altar. In other lands, the family keeps the matter within stone walls. The aim is plain: avoid scandal on the day of crowns. For that aim, women of reputation stake their honor. They risk anger from both sides. Bride's kin want a smooth word. Groom's kin want caution. Between them stands the midwife, who knows that bodies differ while custom demands one pattern, and will punish the shape that does not match. Error costs more than shame. The house settles and waits. When a royal union falters, the door that opens looks fixed and feels like iron. An annulment does not break a marriage. It declares that no true bond was made. Consent without the act can be untied. An act without free heart can be set aside. Other grounds wait: pre-contract kinship, too close error at the altar. Fear bent the will age below the mark. The petition sets the wheels in motion. Riders carry it to a bishop or to a hall with the prince's seal. Scribes lay out ink and vellum. If the claim is that the union was not achieved, the hearing turns slow and exact. Matrons of standing examine the bride and answer under oath. Physicians observe the husband and report on strength and health. Some realms order a fixed season apart, and then a return to the bed before named witnesses. If union follows the case, shuts. If not, the file grows heavier. Money walks behind every word. A dowry may be restored or kept. Gifts may pass back to old coffers. Pledges of land and toll can shift. Factions press the doors and feed the clerks with advice. The church tries to keep peace and still guard rule. Judges ask if either was tricked or forced. They count degrees of blood and search for hidden promises. Appeals rise and weeks become months. The queen lives inside this pause. She is lodged with honor and watched by habit. She walks narrow gardens while the city wagers on her fate. The husband dines in public and speaks less. In chapel, priests ask for mercy. At last, a decision arrives in a leather pouch, warm from the saddle. If the bond is void, she returns to her kin with silver. If the bond is sound, the complainant stands shamed and treaties shudder. Nothing ends clean. Kin grow careful, letters grow thin. Heirs born later will taste this case for years. Power longs for certainty and finds only process. Flesh is asked to obey writ, and it resists. The state tries to fix chance to a page and pays with time. The queen takes one hard breath and counts the price that proof drew. Rumor wakes before roosters. It slides from the bedchamber to the guardroom and down to the kitchen, where bread crusts crack and steam climbs. A maid repeats a sentence she half heard from a matron and adds a breath of her own. A boy runs to the stables and tells a groom. By the time the first cart creaks through the gate, the tale already has legs. Some say the linen was rich with color. Some say it showed only a shadow. Each ear reshapes the night. By noon, the city hums. Tavern benches lean closer. A dice cup pauses. The private hour is now common talk, and each mouth makes it sharper. Courtiers handle rumor like steel. A cousin with a claim drops a word at a feast and then smiles into his cup. A rival minister drafts a letter that lists supplies for a border fort and hides one careful line about a doubtful sign. An envoy writes home that the morning brought comfort or that it brought none, and he chooses terms that let his prince lean either way. Seals are pressed, wax cools. Riders mount, and the road fills with hooves. In a far hall, a council breaks the pouch and studies phrases that look plain and move armies. One clerk writes satisfactory, and the coast stays quiet. Another writes uncertain, and ships are held in harbor. Singers carry rumor farther than envoys. A ballad appears by the market and travels with peddlers and pilgrims. It names no one and names everyone. A queen becomes a figure with pale hands and a closed heart. A king becomes a man undone by wine and pride. People who never saw the palace repeat the song and add a verse from their valley. The tune reaches the ears of men who can hire soldiers. They do not believe the rhyme, and yet they act as if it might be true. Markets wobble when doubt runs through them. Loans thin. Merchants hold grain back from sale, and the price of bread rises for those who have no part in any marriage. The palace answers with theatre and paper. Heralds speak in the courtyard that the union stands firm. Priests preach that slander is sin. Senior ladies swear that all was in order. Chancelleries publish lists of gifts and grants, as if abundance could drown suspicion. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the river is too fast. A single whisper reaches a disgruntled lord at the right hour, and he chooses to ride north instead of south. A captain delays musters. A cousin writes to an old enemy. Thus, rumor becomes weapon, not by its truth, but by its timing. The microbe is small, and the fever is large. By dusk, the court knows the cost of a sentence loosed at breakfast, and learns again that a bed can steady a throne or tilt it with the same silent force. Trick follows fear like a shadow, and the bed invites craft as much as prayer. At dawn, a calm sheet can lift a treaty or ruin it, so some hands try to help fate along. A maid pricks a finger and presses a bead of blood to linen in a neat place. A small vial with animal blood is sewn into a seam and crushed under a knee. A scrap of soaked wool is hidden in the palm and dabbed in the right moment. These are the tales that run through kitchens and guardrooms, carried by servants who know where doors do not quite meet. Some of these tales are theatre told by later ages that love scandal. Some may be true. Fear makes clever pupils and tutors who whisper in the dark. The reasons are plain. A dowry rides on the color of a cloth. A border garrison waits for word that a line will hold. A mother wants her child safe. A minister wants his policy to live another season. They reach for tools that seem small and think the risk is smaller still. Yet trickery never stays small. If a stain shows where no act occurred, then the chamber fills with easy smiles, and with each smile grows a debt to silence that can be called in later. If a stain is forged to hide violence, the lie becomes a cage for years. Thus, each shortcut breeds fresh chains. Courts learned to harden the right. Senior ladies shook the linen in clear light to show that nothing was hidden. Witness lists were drawn and sworn. Relics were kissed before the oath. In some places, a second viewing was held at noon to catch changes in story. Physicians sniffed the cloth and spoke of scent and texture, as if these proved a season of blood rather than a trick. None of this could defeat craft forever. It only raised the price and the number of accomplices needed. Records rarely catch the full plot. Chronicles hint and fall silent. Petitions avoid detail and speak of honor and order. Later pamphlets paint bright colors on a tale and sell copies in the market. So caution is required. We can say that tricks were imagined, that some were attempted, that a few were likely. We cannot map them with tidy lines. What we can trace is motive. Where power depends on a sign, people will learn to shape the sign. The clearest truth lies in the reaction. The more a court feared deceit, the more it multiplied forms. More oaths, more seals, more eyes at the door. With each added layer, the union drifted farther from trust and deeper into performance. That is the quiet verdict of the period. A sheet could be stained by nature or by art. Either way, the realm chose to believe the cloth, and belief itself became the strongest trick in the room. Customs travel, on roads more than on borders. A rite rides with merchants to the next town and takes a new shade. Thus, the bedding and the proof of linen look alike across kingdoms and still feel different in each hall. In England, the public face of marriage stayed hearty. Friends tossed stockings for luck, and many courts trusted sworn words over a lifted sheet. Across the Channel, the tone grew ceremonious. In parts of France, processions wound through rooms heavy with wine and clove. The bedding might be blessed twice, and at dawn, trusted women spoke before nobles in measured phrases. Along the Rhine and in the wider empire, record and enclosure ruled. Statutes drew borders around weddings. A chamberlain touched the coverlet to claim the night for the prince, and a clerk noted who stood within earshot. If a sheet was shown, it went to a coffer. In Italian cities, notaries packed contracts with lists of gifts, dowry stages, and penalties. Iberian courts lived close to heat and devotion. Braziers glowed, and rosemary sharpened the air. Displays were rare, and oaths were rich. In the northern seas, where winters bite hard, the bedding leaned practical, with warm stones spice a short prayer and long patience. In the steppe-facing borderlands, great houses kept privacy, while rumor ran fast through markets. Proof might be carried to a prince in saddlebag and spoken softly by a dowager. Farther east, the language changed, and yet the tension held. A marriage was both sacrament and treaty, and each court found its balance in the style it knew. Across Christendom, one rule rose above the rest. The higher the stake, the more layers of form. A royal wedding piled oaths, seals, witnesses, and reports, until the union looked like an audit. Clerks tried to turn whispers into dates, and midwives bore authority without title. This is the map that matters habit more than paint. Each region asked the same hard question in a different accent. Is the bond real enough to hold an army at a river? Religion stands near the bed and claims to guard its secret. Marriage is counted as holy work, and the act within it is named good when it seeks peace between spouses and the hope of a child. Confessors teach that consent is a promise made before God, and that gentleness is the first law of the chamber. They warn against wine that dulls care. They bless the room with short prayer and quiet hands. They advise warmth in winter and patience in all seasons. They remind the groom that love is not force, and remind the bride that fear is not fault. So faith tries to soften the first knot that politics has pulled tight. Rules draw borders that few keep with perfect care. Long fasts ask for abstinence. Vigils and feast days crowd the calendar. Some realms close the bed in Lent and in the weeks before great feasts. Then ambassadors arrive, and the date cannot move. A bishop grants leave with stern words and writes a careful note to prove that the realm did not forget piety. Confessors balance mercy with example. They know that a public failure would breed more sin than a quiet indulgence. When slander rises, the church speaks with a staff of words. Slander is named a wound to souls and to the peace of a city. A man who spreads tales about a queen may be sent barefoot to the cathedral door with a candle and a fine to the poor. A woman who hawks rumor in the market may be kept from communion until she makes repair. Priests remind the crowd that scandal feeds hunger and cold in far villages because doubt halts trade and pay for soldiers. A sermon can still a street for a week. It cannot hush a court forever. If the union falters, clergy become go-betweens. They urge the pair to keep house in quiet for a span and leave the door shut to curious eyes. They speak of seasons and of rest, and of the grace that grows in time. Some bring relics and ask for prayer at dawn. Some send a discreet midwife who has seen many rooms. A few resist pressure for crude tests and speak the hard truth that bodies differ and that certainty is a poor idol. Other clerics bend to princes and draft forms that lead back to the same door of proof and inspection. Queens keep confessors as steady companions. In letters that rarely survive, they ask how to please a husband and keep dignity at once. They ask for psalms that cool fear and herbs that ease pain. The best advice joins both. Warm water and oil. Slow breath and patience. A psalm in a low voice. Curtains drawn and no witnesses for a time. Sometimes this counsel saves a union and turns a page toward a cradle. Then the church looks wise. Sometimes it fails and the file returns to lawyers. Then the church looks like one more clerk. Faith means to shield marital privacy, and often it does. Yet power drags the altar into the chamber whenever coins and borders depend on a sign. The final word is plain. Religion tries to keep the bed as a place for two souls and for grace. Politics makes it a place for reports. Between them, the confessor shuts the door as far as he can and tells the young to be kind. Cases show the pattern more clearly than rules. In the north, a winter wedding joined a French king to a Danish princess. Mourning brought discord rather than comfort. He sought release at once and spoke of forbidden kinship. She answered that the bed had been truly entered and refused to leave her title. Years of letters followed. Popes commanded reunion. Councils met. The queen waited with a small household and a spine of iron. What began as a doubt about a single night turned into a map of alliances and embargoes, and proved that a marriage bed could pull on all the cords of Europe. Earlier, a mild king of France walked beside a brilliant duchess. Their union produced daughters, and no son. Peace between their vast lands began to shake. The church granted an end for blood too near, and each went on to quick new marriages. The duchess crossed a river and brought her titles to a rival throne. The story carries no test of linen, yet it shows how the logic of heirs could bend law and move borders with a quiet word in a cloister. In Italy and the lands of the empire law, learned to speak through ordeal. A Carolingian lord accused his wife of crimes of the body and the spirit. She agreed to the cold river, the cords held, the water bore her up, and the court had to swallow its tail. The practice sits far from the soft rites of bedding, and yet it is kin to them. It turns the female body into a site for proof before a crowd hungry for certainty. On the Western Sea, a princess from Montpellier brought a claim stronger than beauty. Her match with a young king was needed and resented at once. He fled her chamber, and she lived under guard. Later writers tell that loyal women contrived a dark room and a bride who did not speak, and that a prince was begotten that night. Fact or shaped memory, the birth that followed settled the realm and made a legend of a bedding used as statecraft. In Castile, a Bourbon bride met a fierce king, and a court split by factions. She was set aside almost at once and locked in stone rooms while counselors argued over pre-contract and honor. Songs rose in the streets and knives flashed in the dark. The queen became a symbol of grievance. The sheet from her wedding mattered less than the way a crown could make and unmake a woman with a letter. Near the close of the age, a pair from Aragon and Castile bound their houses under the eyes of friends and foes. Some later accounts say that proofs were shown to still tongues in both courts. We cannot swear to the cloth, but we can see the effect. Their union held, heirs came, and the merchants of two realms learned to count by a single calendar. Here, ceremony and trust walk together and beat rumor for once. These sketches share a line. Tests and oaths and rites do not live alone. They sit inside wider storms of money and land and memory. Each queen is watched by doctors, matrons, clerks, confessors, and by the poor who taste the outcome in the price of bread. A stain, an oath, an ordeal, a cradle, each becomes an argument that travels by river and road. The bed begins as a room with curtains. It becomes a hinge for banners and for bells. What follows the linen shapes lives and borders. When the sign pleases the council, the queen gains a season of quiet power. Gifts flow to her household. Kin are advanced. Her seal begins to travel with orders and alms. If a child soon comes, the court forgives awkward starts and turns memory into praise. If no child comes and whispers grow, the same hands that poured wine grow cool. Doors that opened at a touch become heavy. The queen learns how quickly favor is only weather. Servants feel the turn first. A midwife once welcomed at the hearth is moved to a distant wing. A lady who swore that all was in order finds her son passed over for a captaincy. A chamberlain who kept the coffer of proofs becomes a target for jokes that are not jokes. When fear rises, men look for a hinge to blame, and these faces are close at hand. Some bend and survive. Some refuse and join the quiet procession to country houses and small stipends. Money follows the mood. Merchants delay loans when they sense a quarrel behind curtains. Grain is kept in barns, and the price in the market lifts like a slow tide. Captains hold horses ready and claim that pay is late. A city that lives by trade begins to taste a wedding as if it were weather. Little people feel the cost first. Bread grows thin for those who never passed a palace gate. Families sharpen old tools. A cousin with a claim finds friends. Letters cross rivers. A pope weighs a petition with an eye on wider wars. A king weighs whether to set the queen aside and chooses the path that wounds least and still keeps his line. Sometimes the woman is sent to a convent with honor and with sorrow. Sometimes she is kept in gilded rooms and allowed visitors who carry soft news. A few fight and win a place at the council table through patience and skill. Many fade and leave only a line in a ledger and a tale the city bends to its taste. States turn with them. A union that holds knits taxes and laws and roads. A union that fails invites raids on a border and a famine in a hill valley as carts are stopped by fear. The lesson is plain. The bed is not a private cradle of love in these halls. It is an engine that drives silver and wheat and soldiers. Its power is largest when it seems most small. Myth runs ahead of riders and lingers after banners fall. Later ages tell that every royal wedding ended with a lifted sheet and a roar of the crowd. They tell that a single mark proved all, and that the absence of a mark proved guilt. They tell that midwives could read a body like a book, and that doctors always agreed. The record is quieter. In many halls, no cloth was shown and sworn words were enough. In others, the linen appeared before only a narrow circle. What mattered was not uniform show, but the steady wish to pin certainty onto a night that does not lend itself to counting. Another thick myth says that the female body offers one simple sign. Life is not so neat. Some women bled, some never did, some did later. Work on horseback or a childhood tumble could change a small line of skin. Fear and cold could still the bed. Joy could free it. Medicine of the time wrapped these truths in the grammar of humors, and the church wrapped them in counsel about patience and goodwill. When a cradle came, old doubts faded. When no cradle came, the old doubts returned with fresh teeth, and the myths looked like law. Tricks live loud in stories. Gooseblood in a little vial. A pin for a finger. A staged exchange in a dark room. Some plots were only theatre for the street, and some were likely tried. Courts answered with witness lists and oaths, and coffers with iron hasps. Paper grew to meet rumour, and rumour learned to slip through paper. What we can weigh is motive. Where a state rests on a fragile sign, people will reach to shape that sign. The battle between chance and form was the true constant. So the reckoning. A royal bed in this age is not a private hearth. It is an office where flesh is asked to certify peace. Linen becomes token. Oaths become tools. A queen learns that kindness helps and courage helps more, yet neither frees her from the ledger others keep. The final image is small and exact. Dawnlight, a folded cloth, a clerk note in a narrow hand, a coffer closing. States crave proof because armies are dear and harvests are thin. Proof answers with half-truth, and people live with the gap. That gap is the space where rumor grows, where policy moves, and where a woman carries the crown as well as her name.